everyone, and welcome to this evening chat with Lama Owens here in Southern Dharma. So Lama Owens, if you have not had the chance to sit with him, he is a Tantric Buddhist teacher, the co-author of Radical Dharma, and the founder of Bhumi Sparsha. What is Bhumi Sparsha?
Well, Bhumi Sparsha means touching the earth. So it comes from the Buddha's touching the earth movement, which is here. And so Bhumi Sparsha is like the Sanskrit interpretation of that. But Bhumi Sparsha is just a community that I founded with my colleague and teaching partner, Lama Justin Boydash. And our, mission or goal within the Sangha is to bring tantric practices into a contemporary kind of 21st century context, as we also center more the work of justice and inclusivity.
That sounds like a great overlap. I mean, our world is so in need right now. What does tantric mean and look like in the practices, and how do you meld that with justice work?
Well, I think Tantra, first of all, there's Tantra in every tradition of Buddhism. We've been very good here in America to kind of peel out the tantric elements, but Tantra is really just about how do you get to enlightenment as quickly as possible, and what are the skillful means to do that. So how do we talk about energy and use energy and movement and chanting and visualization? How does that actually open the door to the nature of mind? So it's a very quick path, but it's also very volatile, which is why it comes with a lot of structure, and which is why most people aren't. It's not something that really inspires them. It's not as accessible as just being able to sit and watch your breath, or to go through the four foundations, for instance. It's when we enter into tantric practice, which Tibetan Buddhism is a tantric practice, Hindu tantra, yoga is a tantric practice. When we enter into that vehicle, then we have to really follow really important guidelines. I think if you look at the roots of tantra, particularly as I understand it in Hindu tantra, these tantric practices were really about how do you disrupt social hegemony? How do you live counterculturally? How do you disrupt the things that actually are not useful for our enlightenment and our realization? So taking that spirit, bringing it into the practices now, it's really about, okay, how can I actually take a deity practice, for instance, and actually start considering the reality of racial injustice?
It's funny, we started by talking about that mudra, the touching of the earth as the witness. And on your retreat here, which was about grief and healing the broken heart, working with the broken heart, you emphasized a lot of earth-based practices in helping the earth hold us. Could you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. I think what many people are experiencing right now in the world is a lot of disruption and not having the sense of being grounded. So stuff is always happening. Every single day we get distracted by it, we start reacting to it. Then all of a sudden, we don't have ground anymore. We feel as if we're just free falling. And that produces a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of anger, all kinds of stuff. So when I'm thinking about the earth, I'm thinking about how can I return back to the element of earth that's always there. So the element of earth is under us, the element of earth is within our bodies, the element of earth is within our minds. And that energy is stabilizing, is grounding, is sustaining. And if I can have a regular practice where I'm always returning back to the ground under me, to feeling my body, which is an earth practice, right? And then to understanding the ground within my awareness and within my experience, then I have a foundation in order to stand on, in order to move through the world with. And that can be, we can use any elements, but earth is the element of holding, foundation, stabilizing.
Nurturance, even,
Yeah.
I'd say. In one of the practices that you shared as well on the retreat, it was the 7 homecomings. And I really appreciated how, just like the earth is a place that we can find ground and stability, so were these different refuges, these different homecomings. And the one that you ended on was particularly powerful, the last one, of self.
Yeah.
Do you find people have resistance to that?
Well, I think people can have resistance to all of them, but definitely the self. When I first started teaching it, the last homecoming was coming home to a community. And then the self came before the community. But I've gone through so many iterations of the practice. But yeah, the self is hard for folks because we're always trying to avoid ourselves and our experiences in our minds. Ancestry is often really hard for people. I would say those are the two because they bring attention back to us in some way and back to our histories. And often, from my experiences, often just, white people have a problem with a lot, particularly those two.
Ancestry and self.
Yeah. Because so much of how white people are dealing with whiteness right now is to bypass whiteness and the history of whiteness, and even specifically the trauma of whiteness. And these practices, the 7 homecomings, I say, no, let's go back. You'll never be free until you hold space for these really difficult things. You running away from all of this is not actually doing people of color any good. You're actually bypassing your work, and in doing so, giving that work back to people of color to work through and process. And I had to realize that for my own path. It was I had to understand that the work that I didn't do for myself was the same work that was forcing other people to do on my behalf. Some of that work is called emotional labor. And I think that's the primary work that we're forcing and manipulating people around us to undertake on our behalf because we're not doing it for ourselves. It's one thing to ask for consent for people to help us hold our emotional reality, but there's a whole other thing when we choose to bypass really difficult stuff, and that becomes something that someone else has to work through in order to be in a relationship with us.
Because it's still there,
even
if we want to ignore it and look away.
In our bodies, our experiences, everything that's happening to us right now is a result of the past. So we're born into narratives, we're born into karma, we're born into these storylines that we've inherited, deeply internalized, and we play it out. So to disrupt that playing out, we have to kind of rewind and go back to actually become conscious of the story that we're participating in, and then let it go. But as you let it go, then you open the door to all the discomfort. Because that storyline is purposefully keeping us from connecting to that storyline of discomfort. Or it's keeping us from connecting to what's beneath the storyline, which is this reality of discomfort. And it's there only because we don't know how to work with it. We've never touched into it. We've never attempted to metabolize it and transform it.
The metabolizing of these things.
And we have to train ourselves to do that work. Unfortunately, most people in the world aren't doing that, which impacts the environment, which impacts systems of violence, which impacts politics. It's just a cycle, all stemming from the fact that we actually don't know what to do with our discomfort, which is why Buddha Dharma is so brilliant for me, because it just brings our attention to the fact that we are experiencing suffering, and that it's not a punishment, it's not something that indicates our value. It's just this basic human, or all sentient beings have this. So anything endowed with consciousness is going to have experiences, that are related to pleasure and displeasure, or pleasure or pain.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we have to work out our relationship to that. You know, that's what the Satipatthana is helping us to do. Shamatha meditation. Systems within Tantra around Mahamudra, Dzogchen, transcendental meditation, all kinds of meditation systems are helping us to get into that discomfort and to hold it. If your meditation isn't helping you to do that, then you have to really find something else, that's helping you to do that work. That's the real activism that we need to engage in. And that activism is for ourselves. What we can do for ourselves is more. That means that there's more that we can do for our communities and our collectives and our families and relationships and so forth.
It's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, and we're all super lazy. So there's that. There's that one big obstacle. We all want to be comfortable. So
it's definitely some attachment to comfort.
Yeah, who doesn't want to be? I love comfort, but there is a practice of becoming comfortable in chaos and difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a challenging of our relationship to what comfort is. But that comfort is based upon spaciousness. Anything can happen, and we can be okay with anything as long as there's space. We don't have to get lost. And that's the point. And even ultimately when we come to die, this is what we're really practicing for at that moment of death. Can we hold our own passing? Can we transition and let go of this life, let go of this body, and lean forward to it, step into the next life, wherever that life may be. That's why I always say, at the end of the day, we're just afraid of dying. It's funny when you work through fear of death, or when you begin to hold space or develop a relationship with your own mortality, how open, spacious, and dynamic your whole life gets. People say that you never understand death until you understand life. And you can also say that you'll never understand life until you understand death as well. But living is how we transition, through death. So all that's really beautiful, but it's also super hard. But that's fine, because you can do bit by bit every day. And whatever you can do now will be beneficial, no matter if you've only been practicing for 5 minutes.
I know you're working on many projects. Mm-hmm. You stay busy. But you, in particular, are working on your next book, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Any chance you'd be able to give people listening a sneak peek?
Yeah, so this next book project is really a conversation between love and anger. And this comes out of really, this is a question I've been asked ever since the 2016 elections. What do I do with the anger? Mm-hmm. And particularly in Buddhist communities, people have really been taught to avoid anger, to bypass it. And that actually is something that robs us of a lot of agency and power. It robs us of a lot of potential to be effective and direct. When you're bypassing that really important energy. However, I was trained in Tantric Buddhism, so we have Tantric anger practices, we have wrath. And so there's a really head-on examination of the energy of anger and how to decenter the ego from that. Mm-hmm. So that anger actually transforms to wisdom. And that wisdom actually helps us to consider how to benefit people through the energy of anger, And so the book is really, first of all, examining or recentering anger as being very important, that anger is this vital energy that we need to get things done, to particularly address social issues. However, it's something that we have to learn how to develop agency over. And to develop agency over anger, we actually first have to start taking care of the hurt and the fear beneath the anger. Actually, the anger is arising to point us back to that experience of hurt. So if we have practices that help us to take care of the hurt, then we're not so dependent on the anger as something that's helping us to bypass the difficulty of the hurt, which is a misuse of anger. So we take care of the hurt, and all of a sudden, anger is this energy, and we don't feel trapped by it. We don't feel as if we have to react to it, And then you can channel it into something that's more beneficial than just reacting to it and whooping someone's ass, or doing something unskillful that creates harm and violence for people and for ourselves. And then examining like suffering and like all kinds of like techniques and strategies that I've been working with and developing over the past few years to work with all the subtle aspects and issues associated with anger. It's a harder way. It doesn't feel as good as just like responding to the anger, and it doesn't feel as if it is dynamic enough. It doesn't feel urgent, but it's the only practice that I know of that helps me to do really important, effective work, and also to practice an ethic of restoration and healing at the same time. Anger isn't about healing. Just responding, reacting to anger, you're not going to heal anything.
Everything gets flames,
Expressing anger doesn't heal anything. It has to be this kind of dual approach where we're taking care of the hurt and then returning back to the anger and having agency over the anger. So there's space, but that space is also about wisdom. So you have clarity around what's happening with that energy and what to do with it. And that creates that's a whole different paradigm shift for folks, but it takes effort. So if you're willing to do that, I think that's great. But if you're not, then then you're wasting, as we would say in Buddhist circles, you're wasting this precious human rebirth.
You don't want to waste that.
No, we can't. No, you can't assume that you're going to get this again.
As we sit and as we talk, I find myself thinking about all the communities out there that are working to bring about justice, but to also have restoration. If you were to give any word of advice to those who might be listening who are in a community that might be struggling, what advice would you give?
I think a primary piece of advice is to really work on establishing ethics of care within the community. So helping people take care of themselves, offering care to other people, opening up to receiving that same care, and having that be a primary community value. No matter what the community is established for, prioritizing care is going to help the community be sustainable. It's going to help create a container where people can actually get a lot of support in holding trauma. Right now in our communities, many of us just feel ashamed being traumatized or sad or hopeless, and we cover that up. And of course, the anger comes, and we're so disconnected from that because the anger is so strong. That anger is it's a reflection of the intensity, of the discomfort. So the angrier we are, usually the deeper hurt we are. So we have to develop ways of supporting one another in community where we can get back into holding the pain and realizing that that's going to slow whatever the work of the community is down. Pain slows us down. Anger speeds us up. The pain, woundedness, holding space for that slows us down. Grieving slows us down. It brings us back to the earth. It grounds us. It settles us. We don't stay so high up in our bodies where things happen really quickly. We stay down.
You can't stay up there.
You can't, but people do.
Yes.
People absolutely do, and that I think is the root of a lot of illness, mental illness, energy-based, obstacles and issues that some of us experience. Disembodiment, of course, is part of what it means to stay up above. And so these earth practices brings us back down, but we need to do it as community. We need to return back to the earth as community, and then creating the container where everyone can actually open up to what's hard for them. And you have to do that. Now the difficulty is you're having to do that within the context of a lot of falling apart and breaking away in the world around us. So you have to be able to see what's happening the world, but you also have to balance that with